Hello, I'm Tara Copp, Senior Pentagon Correspondent for Defense One. I'm honored today to be joined by Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin for Defense One's annual Summit, Outlook 2022. Secretary Austin, it seemed very appropriate to me as we are in the Reagan Presidential Library to start with one of the tenets of Reagan's security strategy, peace through strength. We have seen this mantra challenged on two fronts by both Russia and China of late. And so I wanted to start with China, particularly since you just got back from your third trip in the region, and you just started a force posture review that will ultimately shift resources from other theaters and send them west. And as you know, some of your predecessors also tried to do this shift west, but ultimately there were too many competing priorities in the Middle East, and that shift didn't really happen. So I was just wondering now, how is this moment different? And what is driving the sense of urgency to really get us reoriented into the Pacific?
First, I'd like to point out, Tara, that a new administration coming in, one of the first things that you'd expect for us to do is take inventory of where all of our capabilities, all of our forces are, and we want to make sure that our footprint matches our priorities. But it's not just forces, it's capability. And I think we have to remember that we have capability in all warfighting domains, air, land, sea, and also space and cyber, and an undersea capability as well. And so as we look to make sure that we have the right capabilities in the right place, we're really allocating resources in all of those domains. For the last 20 plus years, Tara, we've been focused on fighting countering transnational terrorism. And while we were heavily involved in that fight, the Chinese have been very busy modernizing their military and developing capabilities, in some cases that I think could be considered destabilizing in the region. But it's not just that. We've seen behaviors from the Chinese that are somewhat disturbing and don't really comport with what we believe in terms of making sure that the region, Indo-Pacific region, remains open and free and promotes international commerce and that sort of stuff. So as we've seen China coerce its neighbors and really conduct some malign activities, that's been very concerning to us. The pace at which China is developing capabilities and their activities really caused us to be a bit concerned, because they're on a trajectory to really begin to compete in a more meaningful way in the out years. And so that's why you've heard me describe them as our pacing challenge. And they'll remain our pacing challenge for the foreseeable future. So.
Did that sense of urgency and the rapid modernization become one of the points in the argument that it was time to draw down forces in Iraq and Afghanistan to be able to really do this shift?
Well, again, it's not just the forces; it's the capability in all of those domains. Certainly, the president made his decisions for exiting Afghanistan based on a number of things. And while that was not the driving factor, it certainly provides us additional opportunities to use some of those capabilities in the Indo-Pacific.
And when your force posture review was released, there were a few announcements of smaller footprint resources going to Indo-PACOM, which has led to some questions as to whether or not this really is a shift too. And will we see additional resources being put in? Are we talking thousands of more troops? Are we talking they will finally get all the ISR that they wanted, that other theaters have been fighting for? What do you expect to see?
Well, let me say up front that I don't think there is a combatant commander that will ever have all the ISR that he wants or she wants. Having been a combatant commander, I can say that with some degree of certainty. But in all seriousness, I think again, we continue to evaluate our stance, our footprint, and we make decisions to move resources where we think we need to move them to address whatever issue is evolving. But again, I would emphasize, and you've heard me talk about this notion of integrated deterrence, and it's not just a notion. It's really what underpins our new national defense strategy, which I'll release early next year. And what it means is beginning to network our capabilities in new and different ways, our existing capabilities. It also means that we're going to go after those capabilities that support the operational concepts that we think will be relevant in a future fight. It means that we're going to use all of the assets in the warfighting domains that I talked about earlier, including cyber and space and undersea capabilities. It also means that we're going to use every instrument of national power and not just always the military. We're going to, in all cases, lead with diplomacy, but certainly if diplomacy fails, we'll be in a good position to win and win decisively, no matter what the issue is. And as important, it means that we're going to leverage the capability and the capacity that's resident in our allies. Our allies allies and partners have some tremendous capacity in a lot of cases, and I just think we need to do more to work with them to develop what they have and to use what they have in more effective ways. So.
Will that mean possibly some tough choices for some of our allies, particularly those that are in the Indo-Pacific, where they may have China as one of their chief trade partners? How do you build that integrated deterrence without putting some of those allies in a rough spot?
Well, certainly we will always be respectful of what our partners and allies' national interests are, and we'll work with them in every way we can to make sure that we respect those national interests. But where there's an ability to employ their capabilities to address larger regional issues, and certainly we'll do that. And sometimes, that's the forces, and sometimes, it comes in other forms, as I mentioned, in cyber or space-based capability as well. So.
I'd like to ask about both Ukraine and Taiwan. It struck me that both of these points of conflict right now are because there's no clear-cut U.S. policy on at what point troops would be engaged to either defend Ukraine or to defend Taiwan, and it seems like both Russia and China are exploiting this. First, with Ukraine, just earlier today, the president said that he was creating a more comprehensive plan for how to deal with Ukraine. Are you consulting with him? Are you providing military options in case that's part of this whole comprehensive strategy to protect Ukraine?
Our goal in both cases, Tara, is to lead with diplomacy and address these issues in a way that we don't get to conflict. And I think it's really, really important to remember that. You've heard us, when we talk Ukraine, you've heard us say that we're very much interested in a rules-based international order, which respects the sovereign territory of every country. So we believe that Ukraine has a right to defend and protect its sovereign territory, and you've seen us, move to support them in terms of providing them materials and some advisors, and I recently had the Ukrainian leadership in for a visit in the Pentagon, and I was just in Ukraine a couple of weeks ago. So we have a great relationship, and again, we're interested in making sure that they have what they need to be able to defend themselves. So.
If push came to shove and Russia did invade with U.S. forces in Ukraine, what are the options at that point? Would they fight alongside some of the Ukrainians they've trained, or are those just things that they're still under consideration?
Yeah, I won't speculate on what could happen in that instance, Tara. I would just say that, number one, our goal is to make sure that it doesn't happen. That we're working with our international partners and allies to ensure that we convey to Russia that this is a really bad idea. Recently, you've heard Secretary General Stoltenberg from NATO convey his concerns, and he emphasized that it would be a really bad move for Russia to do something like that.
It seems like some of those messages are getting more urgent, such as Stoltenberg's warning, and then we had the chairman yesterday talk about he's extremely concerned about what he's seeing along the border, and that potentially that's changed from just a forces buildup to maybe the logistical support too that would be needed. From what you're seeing, has your level of concern increased, or do you think that this might actually be able to be solved diplomatically?
I think there's always, until something actually happens, I always believe that there's a chance to resolve it in ways other than force. We've expressed concern for a number of weeks because of the numbers of forces that we see in the border region. We also see destabilizing rhetoric in the area that's very concerning. We see in the information space there's some very unhelpful language. We see some cyber activities. You heard President Zelensky say recently that he was concerned that there was an effort to destabilize his administration. So when you add all those things together, this looks very familiar. It looks like a replay of 2014 when Russia invaded Ukraine the first time. And so, again, a familiar pattern. And because we've seen this before, we saw what the outcome was, we remain concerned. So I think we're going to continue to work with our partners and allies to make sure that we're looking ahead here. So
I know that the department does not like discussing a potential red line, but is there a point where it would actually be beneficial to just say directly to Russia, cross this line, and the U.S. military gets involved to protect a partner?
I think in situations like this, I think conveying red lines only exacerbates the problem. I think we need to focus on finding ways to de-escalate and to reduce tensions and really get to the point of addressing what the central issues are. So.
And would there be any advantage to broadcasting a potential red line such that transparency can sometimes be a deterrent as well?
Well, I think certainly the leadership of Ukraine has its own concerns and has its own set of circumstances that it would consider issues that it would consider problematic, of course, if they presented themselves. So I'll leave that up to the Ukrainian leadership, but I don't think it's helpful for us to draw lines in the sand at this point. So.
Similarly with Taiwan, there have been escalating number of incursions into the Taiwan ADIZ. Based on what you're seeing, do you think that China is preparing or at least training their military to be ready to attack Taiwan? And again, it's that same kind of gray area where there's U.S. commitment and there's training and there's weapons. But what is that, I guess, where does it stop becoming training and weapons and it actually becomes the U.S. will step up to the defense of Taiwan?
Well, we've been consistent in our message that, we're very supportive of Taiwan and based upon what's been outlined in the Taiwan Relations Act. We'll continue to provide support so Taiwan can defend itself. And we remain committed to, and there's bipartisan support for Taiwan, and I think that's very important as well. We don't want to see a change in the status quo, especially certainly a unilateral change in the status quo. We think that all tensions in that area should be resolved diplomatically first, and again, we are committed to making sure that Taiwan has what it needs to defend itself.
And kind of a hard hypothetical, but if Taiwan was invaded or Ukraine was invaded, At that point, does the military have an obligation to engage in some ways to remain credible as as a credible partner and ally?
I think again, I won't get engaged. I won't engage in hypotheticals, Tara. But when it comes to our reputation and in a case like that, I think take for example Russia. If Russia invades Ukraine, I think Russia should be concerned about its reputation because the international community will react very strongly to yet another incursion into Ukraine. So I think the aggressor here is the one that we ought to be focused on in terms of reputation. So.
I'm going to shift a little bit to all of the various rapid weapons modernization tests that we've seen. We've seen China launch a hypersonic missile. North Korea has launched a hypersonic missile and a rail-based ballistic missile. You see Russia testing hypersonic missiles. Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall earlier this week said, we're in an arms race now. Do you agree with this?
Tara, you've heard me say on a number of occasions that China is our pacing challenge. And as we discussed earlier, the concern is that China has been really moving very rapidly to modernize its military. And it's not just efforts in a hypersonic realm. It's also working very hard to develop capability, naval capability, capability with its ground forces, space capability, space-based capability. So the entire realm of activity here is what causes me to remain focused on them as and so I think that my job is to defend this country, to defend the United States of America, and we don't have a responsibility or concern to just defend against one thing. It's the entire realm of capability that we're focused on, and so we will continue to make sure that we maintain a competitive edge in terms of technology and the ability to defend ourselves. And that's what we're going to stay focused on in the future. So.
And the Reagan Defense Conference, a big part of that is talking about the industrial base and how to modernize. And how much confidence do you have that the industrial base is ready to match, meet, surpass China's amount of investment and development?
I think I have tremendous confidence, and I think we need to make sure that we understand that America remains the greatest country in the world, and it has the capability to continue to do what it's done in the past, and in terms of being very innovative and be able to link systems together to create significant capability. We sometimes view our adversaries as being 10 feet tall. I approach this problem set with confidence and determination. This is America, and we're gonna continue to do what we've always done, and that is not only rise to the occasion but stay out in front. And so that's the one of the issues, the messages that you'll hear me convey here. Is that we need industry to continue to do what it's done in the past, but even more so. And I have every confidence that industry will rise to the occasion. So.
Well, since we are talking about ability to match, when you saw the China hypersonic missile, did it give you great pause for concern? And is this a technology that we can already match?
Well, I certainly won't advertise what we have in the inventory. Again, my focus, Tara, is to make sure that we have the ability to defend against a range of capabilities, adversary capabilities, and so you can create one particular item, and it can be it can be fascinating, very attractive, and a lot of folks can focus on it. What we've demonstrated over the years is our ability to bring together a warfighting capability that includes all of the domains and link that capability together in a way that's just been dominating. And we'll continue to do that in the future.
So with the hypersonic missile, was there any part of that that gave you greater pause, or do you think that there's been too much hype around this particular launch?
Well, I think, we've seen both China and Russia continue to work to develop capability. We can expect that will continue to happen. I will remain focused on making sure we can defend, not only defend against that kind of capability, but we maintain a competitive edge in everything that we're doing. So when we bring together the full spectrum of all the things that we have in our inventory, I think we remain an awesome country. So.
Has the Pentagon completed its assessment of that launch, or do you feel confident that you know the full range of capabilities that China is trying to test?
Tara, you won't hear me get into intel analysis in this forum, but again, we remain watchful of not only China but Russia, and we remain focused on continuing to develop what we'll need to have in order to be dominant in the future.
Thank you. For our next round of questions, I'd like to shift more to domestic focus. You took office basically just 2 weeks after the January 6th insurrection. You have been working to address extremism in the ranks and to deal with all of the various challenges that the department is facing. But it still seems that there's a disconnect between the public perception of the military and what is happening within the building. The latest Reagan Foundation poll found that trust in the military has dropped from 70% in 2018 to 45% now. And I was just wondering, how concerned are you about this? What do you think drove that?
Well, I certainly am concerned about the trend there, Tara. I think, especially with an all-volunteer force, that it's very important that we have the trust and confidence of the American people. So we're going to continue to look at, take a hard look at the survey and make sure we understand the numbers and the trends. And again, I think we'll do everything within our power to make sure that America maintains confidence in its military. I think that's very important. But Tara, if the average American could see what I see on a daily basis as I go out and interact with these young men and women in uniform, and the sacrifices they make, the great work that they're doing, the tremendous sacrifices on the part of their families. It's just amazing. I think what we have to do more of in the future is to tell their stories and to highlight what they're doing, because they're doing some incredible work. And America should feel good about its military. So.
Diving down further into that survey, the foundation found that one of the drivers of this loss of confidence was that they felt the military's become too politicized and maybe acts in an unprofessional manner at times. How do you get the military back to that apolitical footing that it enjoyed for a long time?
Yeah, Tara, the military doesn't exist in a vacuum, and as you take a look at the landscape around the country, things have become a lot more partisan in recent years, and if you look at what's going on various websites, that really adds fuel to some of that partisanship. But I think it's very, very important that our military remain apolitical. And so there are things within the military that you certainly would, internal issues that you want to make sure you focus on and be concerned about. But there are also external drivers that can really cause politicization of the military. That's a difficult word to say when you. But anyway. I think that this is something that's important to us. This is something that we're going to continue to work on. Again, it's critical that the American people have confidence in its great military, and it is a great military.
Are there some specific steps you think you can take or you're considering to, press the apolitical, focus of the military?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that you have to continue to work with leaders and all of our troops to revisit on a sustained basis. This is who we are. This is what we do, and this is why it's important to remain apolitical. And again, the other thing is, I think we need to tell the story of what they're doing. They're doing amazing work. So.
It seemed like the military's role, not only in the January 6th insurrection, where some service members and some veterans have now been found to be taken apart, but also the use of the National Guard after the George Floyd protests, or during the George Floyd protests, might have something to do with this erosion. And there's a second study out there right now that finds that as far as recruiting goes, the biggest drop-off in interest in recruiting has happened with Black males. So I was just wondering, if you were talking to a parent of a potential recruit right now, what would you say to help build their trust that this is the military they think they knew?
Well, what I'd tell them, Tara, is I spent a short 41 years wearing the cloth of our nation. When I joined the Army, when I finished West Point and went into the Army, my goal was to stay for 5 years. 41 years later, I took the uniform off. What caused that to happen was that I really loved what I was doing. I loved working with great people, being a part of a great organization, and doing things that were really important. The military created tremendous opportunities for me. I learned a lot about myself. I worked hard, and I, in most cases, I was rewarded for my hard work. And certainly, when you get to be a 4-star general, you can't complain about not being rewarded. But I was given opportunities that I thought were tremendous opportunities. So what I would tell a parent is that if your son or daughter wants to have a great opportunity to be successful, if they want to be a part of something that's important, that's bigger than them, I think the military is a tremendous opportunity. Now, the military is not for everybody, but I think for those young people that want to be a part of something that's important and that want the opportunity to live up to their full potential, I think the military is a great choice. It's a great choice today. It was a great choice, 60 years ago, 70 years ago. It'll be a great choice 100 years from now. It is, the defense of our nation, I think, is something that all of our troops who are in the ranks today are really, really proud of being a part of. So.
Do you ever share the story of what got you to serve?
For me, it was kind of a cultural thing. I grew up in a family where, Southern family where military service was kind of expected. It's kind of one of the things that you did. And I always knew that I would find a way to serve in some fashion. I had, my father served. He was a young truck driver in World War II who served in the Philippines. I had uncles and cousins that served, and so I was certainly going to do my part one way or the other. So.
Well, great. I think that we're almost out of time, but we deeply appreciate you being a part of our annual summit and helping us kick it off, and we'll see how the rest of the week goes. Thank you very much for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me, Tara. And by the way, your viewers probably don't know that You've been on and off the battlefield as a journalist throughout your career, and we were just sharing a story the other day where we were both in Iraqi Freedom 1 about the same time. And let me applaud you for all the tremendous work that you've done to bring the story of our great military to the American people, and no doubt you continue to do that. So thanks to you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.